I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. President. We'd like to thank the Secretary General and Martin Griffiths for their views. We have taken note of what was said by Mr. Ayad Aga. We would like to comment on the report on the humanitarian situation in Syria in April and May this year. We are increasingly concerned by reports of the food and fuel crisis in the country. It's regrettable that the report once again never pins responsibility for this on the United States of America, not only because of unilateral sanctions, but also because of its ongoing occupation of the northeast of the country. People, including children, are starving, and work in social and also medical facilities is stopping. The fuel shortage is affecting the operations of water supply plants and electrical power stations, and Syrian farmers are being hit. As regards Western sanctions, humanitarian workers themselves who are trying to work in Syria decry them. We have talked repeatedly of these difficulties. These include obstacles in financial operations, in logistics, and in the fact that humanitarian exemptions don't work. Statements by Washington and also by a number of other capitals saying that unilateral sanctions is apparently how they uphold their international obligations, and also their assertions that they're targeted and balanced in nature, not only ring hollow and unconvincing, but also demonstrate their inhumane treatment of civilians in Syria. The deteriorating humanitarian situation continues to worsen through tragic events which undermine security. In this context of particular significance was what Martin Griffiths mentioned, namely a series of airstrikes by the Israeli Air Force on the 10th of June in the outskirts of Damascus, as a result of which the runway and the hall of the international airport of the Syrian capital were damaged, and the airport has to close. As a result, flights were cancelled through the capital, and this included the UNAS air service. This is a key humanitarian route upon which the lives of more than 2 million people depend. Such actions are unacceptable. They have a serious impact on civilians in Syria and are likely to escalate the situation in the whole region. We're astonished by a lack of reaction to this by those parties who are so thrilled by humanitarian deliveries to Syria. It's clear that for our Western colleagues, those Syrians who read humanitarian assistance in the areas controlled by the government and those who live in territories not under the Syrian government and receive assistance are two separate groups of people. Given this, we've drawn attention to information that the US managed to supply the Mahavir Asaura affiliated fighters in the Rukban camp. If this is true, then given the anti-Syrian sanctions, this is an anathema. Demonstrating such concern regarding internationally recognized terrorist Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is something that is significantly easier for our American colleagues. The experts of the monitoring team of the UN Sanctions Committee 1267, 1989 and 2253 for several years now have confirmed the fact that one of the main sources of income of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is enrichment through humanitarian assistance delivered to the enclave. In order to resupply their fighters, it seems that Washington just needs to add on an extension to the cross-border mechanism. We also note that recently in American political circles, there is once again discussion about exonerating these terrorists. Furthermore, according to reports, Idlib has seen an increase in flows of Western weapons sold by corrupt Ukrainian officials. In a word, Idlib terrorists in all regards should count their blessings, as we say. The black markets that were fueled in Europe have become a new gold mine, not only for them, but also for radical Islamists throughout the entire Middle East. Mr. President, predictably, many talk today about the need to renew the cross-border mechanism. In July, we also heard that on the Syrian humanitarian track, much was not achieved due to reasons beyond the control of the UN. Frankly, this is highly debatable. it's hard not to conclude that there are double standards regarding the settlement of the situation in Syria. An example of this is the recent collective statement to the Council by senior UN officials that was mainly on the issue of the cross-border mechanism. We regret the fact that we don't see a similar ruckus regarding other Syrian issues, including regarding early recovery work, cross-line deliveries of humanitarian assistance. The results of the UN work in this area, frankly, are pitiful. We are particularly disappointed that over the period of a year, there were just 5 cross-line convoys. Is this what was intended when a year ago we adopted Resolution 2585? Mr. President, we're absolutely convinced that organising humanitarian deliveries in coordination with Damascus is possible to all regions of Syria. And this is something that the government of the country is seeking to facilitate broadly. It's become obvious after the Yarabia crossing point was closed on the border with Iraq. And such a model can lead to deliveries to the northwest of Syria across the cross-line points. Once Bab al-Khawa is closed, they can increase too. We do not deny the fact that the UN efforts are being blocked by marginal terrorist elements, which undermines trust in humanitarian workers as a whole. It seems that the tail is wagging the dog, and our Western colleagues find this perfectly acceptable, the situation. In order to prove the opposite, you had a whole year. Particular zeal, for example, regarding concern about the Idlib or other terrorists, was something that, quite frankly, we just don't see. Along with this, on the initiative of some colleagues, there's an ongoing politicization of dialogue on humanitarian assistance in Syria. As a result, the Council is unable to adopt even modest documents that could have upstream formed the necessary basis for constructive discussion on the cross-border mechanism. This extremely unpleasant context is one we simply cannot ignore. In conclusion, we would also like to ask the OCHA leadership to provide more detailed information about the so-called Integrated Action Plan for dignified shelter and living conditions for those in the northwest of Syria. What specific regions are covered by this program, and what progress has there been in its financing? We also would like to receive more detailed information from OCHA about those early recovery projects that have already been financed by donors. We believe that these types of efforts should be expanded, including in territory under the control of the government as well, in order to ensure that those Syrian refugees returning home have roofs over their heads. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for their statement. I